Oh,
Bleach and Naruto, where they literally have demons inside of them,
ah,
like
yeah, yeah, the supernatural. Yeah,
the inner
yeah,
evil inside of their bodies. Like it's an inner evil. Like we're born with evil. We're born
right.
in sin.
Yeah, yeah.
In my mother's womb, in sin, my mother conceived me.
Conceived me. Yeah, yeah,
And I think that truth is still resonant somehow by God's common grace
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in that
That's
culture.
yeah.
This is the KKT Show.
All right. So, hello, welcome to another KKT Show podcast, and with me, joining me today is Jacob Van Olst, a friend of mine, a fellow anime enthusiast from Canada. Jacob, hello.
What up, Karen?
Yeah, yeah. All right. That's actually remarkably close to yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So let's begin. Anime. Um, Yeah, it is a form of art, isn't it? Anime is a form of art, so we'll go in from there. How do you view art as such, and maybe in Christian terms? How do you view art in Christian terms?
I view art in Christian terms similar to how Tolkien viewed it, where he said when an author writes, he is
Yeah,
trying to convey some of his own sub creator into that book.
right,
And I kind of view anime and other art forms in general in a similar way.
right.
So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because there are a lot of depictions of stuff going on around, and all of that is considered art. And while they're not particularly Christian, we'd still call them art. And yet there would always be a distinction, I guess, which you draw,
mhm,
in which something isn't really glorifying God, and therefore, while it's still art, it's not Christian art.
mhm,
But on the other hand, there are some who might say that it is only Christian art if it depicts religious imagery, and I guess I have a problem with that, and I guess so would you, because it's not just religious imagery, or I don't even know if you depict religious imagery, but anything that is true and beautiful and noble would all be, I guess, quote unquote, Christian art in some sense, because it depicts noble virtues and nobility and truth and beauty and all of that.
yeah, I think that's kind of similar to what St. Augustine said about truth, right?
Right?
Where he
Yeah.
said all truth is God's truth. So
Yeah.
if God owns and makes
All truth.
everything and upholds the world, then of course it's going to be in essence his art.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
even if it's trash, it still in essence belongs to him. He can do away with it if he wants. Like that's his prerogative, like he did with Israel.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, and on that point, I guess the reason I brought up the distinction is because there's this verse. I forget where it was. Was it in Isaiah 40:19? Let me just see if I can find that. Yeah, it was in Isaiah 40:19. Let me just quote this thing. It's simple. It's actually, yeah, a craftsman casts it, and a goldsmith overlays it with gold and casts it for silver chains. It's basically talking about artisanship and using artisans using their skill, but it ends up perverting God's glory. So there's certainly a kind of depiction that would pervert the glory of God, I guess. So that's
Mhm.
that's that's one part of art when we speak about it in those kind of terms, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think there is always going to be that distinction of of imagery that is going to be not made for God,
yeah,
but specifically still somehow glorifies God, like the rocks and the trees, like Thomas Aquinas' natural revelation.
right, yeah,
And then
yeah.
the
And
other
then
one,
art specifically made almost evil in a sense, in which it's not glorifying God, it's actually perverting the glory of God. And when you
Hmm.
create stuff like this, all right, as in Isaiah 40:19, when he creates something that is used by the people to glorify that particular thing, I guess that would then be excuse me, a form of art that perverts the glory of God in some sense.
Hmm.
Would you say that? So
Yeah, I
would
would agree
that
with
be
you.
a yeah? So would that be a distinction that we can draw somewhere? All right. So we begin in that kind of a mode, and it's the reason I began with this is because we are going to talk about anime, and anime is in some sense art, and
Hmm.
art, as we have seen, can be used to glorify God, and as well can at times be a perversion, bring about a perversion of God's glory. So how do you view anime as art? And maybe that'll be a two-part question. How do you view anime as art, and how do you view anime the cultural phenomenon? Because at some level, I think we can draw a distinction between anime as art and anime as a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah,
And
I think you're right. The other day I was seeing like this chart on the rise in anime of
right,
popularity, and it was like slowly starts from here. And it's like 1999, 1998, 1999, go 2009-ish, 2020, it's getting higher. Like once you get to 2020, it's over here. Once you skip to 2021, it goes
yeah,
all the way up. I'm
yeah,
like, wow. And as someone who's recently gotten way more into it than he has in the past, I think you kind of, with everything the news touches, you kind of get to
yeah,
see more of the perversion than the good
right,
stuff,
right, yeah, yeah,
because the news likes to,
yeah. Push out
re-
the more, yeah,
yeah, more satisfying stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
a little depressing, but
uh-huh.
uh, I think that's my view of it as a cultural icon. Like
Yeah,
it,
yeah, as a
it's
cultural phenomenon. Yeah,
it's a cultural phenomenon. Yeah, it was originally big, especially to like people who play D&D or just knew about it in general. And now it's like, whoa, this is just as cool as the Marvel movies now.
yeah. That's a funny tangent, but I think I'll jump on that because it's a particularly Western view because while back in India, when you say you watch anime,
Mm,
at first it's almost all right. So you watch cartoons and then you've got to delve into a bit and say, well, no, not exactly. It's not exactly as cartoon. I mean, want to watch this series with me, and you obviously show either Pokemon or Dragon Ball Z, which is I guess which
yeah,
were the famous ones back then. And
yeah.
then they come in and then they watch it with you, but there isn't the cultural stigma attached to being an otaku or a weeaboo, I guess, in some cultures, as it is over here. Because if you watch children's stuff, you just watch children's stuff, and it doesn't matter if you watch cartoons or anime or whatever. And if you've gone past 18 and you still watch that, you're weird, but you're still not an otaku or a weeaboo. You're just you're just weird. But so
Yeah.
that's kind of the perception here. So yeah, but over there in the West, it seems more agreeable to say that you love Marvel when you're in your 20s, rather than to say you love anime or cartoons in your 20s. Now I think that's shifting, I guess, but
Hmm.
is that depiction accurate at least maybe a few years prior,
I
decades
think
back?
so. Yeah, I think back then it was probably more of a phase than it is now. Whereas people are like,
Right.
oh, hey, people are actually making this to say things like,
Oh,
which we'll get
yeah,
into later,
yeah,
like the
yeah.
philosophical stuff.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And it's not like the stuff other than like Naruto and Dragon Ball Z, where it's still going. You have like these finished products
yeah,
where they
yeah,
tell a complete story,
yeah.
almost like a book.
Right.
And I think that's kind of like everybody's noticing that now, that we're originally like just writing it off. as something nerdish like D&D that you just do it forever.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a
yeah.
phase.
Yeah. D&D, the nerd subculture, very different from what we have here, but it's still fascinating. I'd
Mm.
love to get into the Western Eastern conceptions of anime and nerd culture as a whole. Because back home, when you call someone a nerd, what you refer to is the fact that he or she is keeps on studying and gets the first rank. But that's basically it. Yeah, there is no attachment to D&D or any of the cultural ideas of nerd fandom that you see in popular culture. Fascinatingly, though, once you get into Hollywood stuff and you realize that that is what the Western conception of nerd is, it quickly transpires that we also seem to have that, desire to call someone a nerd if he or she engages in an activity, not just studying and engages too much into it. So it's slowly changing towards a Western ideal. I don't know if it's good or bad. I guess I'll have to wait and see. But yeah. Up until quite recently, if you were studying a whole lot, you were a nerd. That was basically it. There was nothing else attached to it. No D&D. We didn't really play D&D until we knew what it was through Sheldon and all the other Big Bang Theory and all of that. No one had an idea of D&D. But now, yeah, people play this.
I just gotta appreciate you guys play it based off of the Big Bang Theory, which
Yeah,
I've
a
only
lot of
watched
us do.
pieces of.
A lot of us do because that's how you get into all of these things. Yeah. We, we played Snakes and Ladders, not Dungeons and Dragons. Although I guess you call them Shoots and Ladders, though, don't you? Or is it Snakes and Ladders there? It's so.
I don't remember what's on the box 'cause I haven't played it in ages, and I don't remember
Ooh.
which grandparent had it. I don't remember if it was my
Yeah,
mother's or my dad's, but
yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was Snakes and Ladders. I don't think it was Shoots.
Right. Yeah. I've heard some called Shoots and Ladders, but yeah. All right. So, but there's one more thing that I want to talk about in the Marvel tangent that we went on, which is I don't remember the video of the guy who put this out, but he called it the creative bankruptcy of Marvel, in which he mentioned that Marvel Comics. Now we're not talking about the huge television, the big screen stuff, because it
Yeah.
seems to garner a lot of audience. But
Mhm.
the comic book stuff seems to be creatively bankrupt in the sense that they cannot produce awesome storylines as anime can, and it seems
Mhm.
to always be driven to
There we
a
go.
a sort of uh, woke tendency. And I use that guardedly because I'm not trying to call out some people or anything, but there is a tendency to introduce a whole array of characters just based on their identity as part of the story instead of actually having a thick, really fleshed out storyline. You just add these characters who have different identities based on their gender or race or culture or all of that, and that seems to be the major driving part of the story, which is not the case with anime, at least from a superficial standpoint. Would that be the case? And if that's so, does anime have way more of a creative juice flowing through than Marvel, which seems to me to be slightly creatively bankrupt?
I would probably mostly agree with that. My personal favorite anime is Cardcaptor Sakura,
Oh,
um,
yeah,
which is a magical girl anime, which of course it is.
yeah.
It's
Yeah. You call it Mahou Shoujo, right? I
yeah,
guess that's how you. Yeah,
yeah, that is correct.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it's it includes a diverse cast with diverse representation, but it
Right.
doesn't make that the focus of
Of the
the
story.
story. It has a plot going through it. And I think that kind of ties back to what C.S. Lewis once said, whereas where he said something like the story can have morals in it, but the story must never be the moral, something like that.
No,
So
that's fascinating. Yeah. Maybe expand on that a bit, and let's see where we go.
so one of the main characters, so there are a few main characters in Cardcaptor Sakura. One is Sakura herself. She's learning to come into her own with her own power and whatnot. And then she meets this young boy, and then uh he's kind of like detached, and they both have she has this crush on her older brother's best friend, and you'll clearly see in the show if you're older he's not straight.
Oh, yeah.
Neither of them are, but Sakura and this younger boy who came to a school from China, um, he takes a fascination as well to this crush of Sakura's, and that's how they initially connect. And
Right.
then he's like, so this is a spoiler warning. If you haven't watched Cardcaptor Sakura, I highly encourage you actually watch it. It's
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
a really good show.
Watched it a bit. Yeah, yeah. Not, yeah. I didn't go into it the whole
But
way. Yeah, go on.
he they learn that he's this like magical guardian of a younger boy who's an incarnation of a famous wizard from centuries ago.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, you're not attracted to me, you're just attracted to my magic. Go out with Sakura.
Huh. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like you know the sports movies and stuff. When you see you're not attracted to me, it's just my athletics or my abilities. But yeah, yeah. Go on. Yeah.
So I'm fine with that.
Right.
Like, I mean, I don't have to agree with it, but
No. Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what tolerance is all about, right? It's
Right.
like
Yeah.
it's still my favorite show.
Yeah.
So that and it doesn't make that part of the story central
Yeah.
focus. The
Yeah.
central
That
focus
isn't the
is
focus.
Sakura collecting these cars to get more magic. Like that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is
That's true.
everything
That's true.
surrounding it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's where Marvel seems to have lost the plot a bit when they make the identity of the character the major
Mhm.
plot of the story. Yeah, yeah. Anime doesn't seem to have that problem. At least from what I see, they seem to have created all of these genres. So if you want to watch this particular thing, if you want to watch supernatural anime or maybe yaoi or that kind of stuff, there is this catalog for you, and you can go in and watch it there. So you've got this particular group where you can watch to your heart's content this particular identity, and so on and so forth. But you're not really using the identity or something as the major driving plot of the story for a huge anime. It's not what seems to me to be the case in anime, and you're probably right. Yeah. And I guess the distinction that we can draw there is that Marvel, at least in some sense, is creatively bankrupt. Now, is that a result of modern Western culture being as a whole bankrupt or not? I have no idea. Although that's fun to think about. I
Well,
like to to lash
I
out
think
at
this.
Western culture. You guys are all bankrupt. Look at us. But no,
I don't
but
think you're
no.
too far off because I think Western culture was like the birthplace of the Enlightenment, which
Yeah.
gave birth to the postmodernity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's true. Although, yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
and I had this interesting thought the other day about that, and like, we as a the Western culture as a whole has gotten so used to the concept of questioning and being skeptical about
Yeah.
everything that
Yeah.
we've forgotten the concept of believing in anything.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess was it G.K. Chesterton who said that when you start to question everything, you ultimately you have no there is no end point to it. You're just viewing a lot of mirrors because you keep on questioning all of that. There is no ground for you to stand on. I
I
am
love G.K. Chesterton. He is a
yeah.
fantastic author and he's so quotable.
Yeah, and I've demolished that quote to to ashes at this point. That really wasn't the quote, but the fact is, yeah. But the gist of it was that you can't keep questioning everything. That you have to have some basis, some foundation. That was the idea of
Yeah,
Chesterton's quote. Yeah,
yeah.
not the quote itself.
The mind is like a lid. It opens to shut down on something.
Ah, yeah, exactly. It opens shut down on something. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. That was the idea. Yeah. Was that the quote itself?
it was close.
Uh-huh,
It's probably
yeah,
not
yeah,
exactly, but it's
yeah,
probably
yeah.
more of a paraphrase.
Right. Yeah. 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 You've got a shot. Yeah. And was it because I remember that being used in a debate? Yeah, between Doug Wilson and Christopher Hitchens when they talked about that, and Wilson brought up the same thing, and Hitchens said, "Well, you know, you can wait for it to hold on to something because even now we are in the process of finding out what it is that we ought to hold on, something similar to that. I guess that was his argument in some fashion, if I remember right.
Hitchens, I'm not sure if I've watched that debate, but I Hitchens was interesting in the fact that he's at the end of it, he is kind of like he has this interesting. Did you hear about that story with like the him signing the book and the woman coming out to him?
I seem to remember
And
parts of it, but no, yeah, go on. And what happened?
he's like, "Oh, that my legacy is trying to be this atheist against Christianity or any religion whatsoever." Is like, huh, maybe this wasn't the greatest idea. Something like that. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
interesting. My
yeah,
associate pastor said it something better. Said my
right.
pastor said it better than I did.
But yeah, I guess yeah, that might have been true. Yeah, yeah. Christopher Hitchens, yeah, awesome guy, but yeah, seems to have a lot of contradictions going on. But yeah, so the whole thing,
Which, as a philosophy, which any philosophy aside from Christianity is going to have as a whole, and we're probably going
yeah,
to see that as more as we go along,
true, yeah, yeah, absolutely,
which
and
is going to be fun.
which is gonna be fun. And I guess that's where we landed at, the Western culture, being this awesome cradle of civilization for quite some time, and people don't really uh, applaud that, but I think they ought to, because it is the birthplace of civilization. It is a fact that Western culture brought us mathematics and science, the scientific method in particular. Although mathematics might have been started by the those in the Middle East, it certainly is the Western scientists who use mathematics and the scientific method to give us all of these things. So
Yeah,
there
well,
is
we
a
have
democracy, the rule of law. Exactly. Yeah, the whole of the Greeks.
Socrates, the pre-Socratic
Right.
method,
Exactly.
Pythagoras.
So that's yeah, yeah, true. So it's certainly true and laudable that Western civilization has given us all of these, and it's also sad that it is the very same civilization that is now bankrupt in a lot of ways. And yeah, that's sad. But yeah, it is what it is. And in some senses, I hope that other Eastern cultures would adopt good values from the Western culture, and maybe integrate all of that and move forward.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, all right. So we talked about that, and we're still in anime, and anime as a cultural phenomenon. And here's where I guess we'll move into the philosophical aspects of it, because when something is a cultural phenomenon, it'll certainly have to have all of the ideas and institutions and foundations that give rise to a culture. So obviously, you would have depictions of justice and injustice, good and evil, all of that, right? So you're gonna have that in these depictions, in these anime, because we see how Hollywood produces movies that
Mhm.
blatantly have a moral structure. Even though you claim to be subjective to the uttermost, you will presuppose a set of moral values that you deem to be the best, and that is how you would put out your movies. How do you view the moral structure of anime? If they have a moral structure, they will certainly presuppose some kind of a moral structure to their story. So how do you view that, and how global is it? Because and here's a question: it certainly has wide appeal, and the appeal of anime would be driven in part to how people relate to the distinction between good and evil in these shows. So, because of the global appeal of anime, do you think they've got something right in terms of good and evil, right and wrong, or do you think it's just a human tendency to like this particular stuff? How do you view that?
Ooh, I think that's probably going to depend on the anime.
Yeah,
Uh,
true.
like the shows like Monster and Death Note, they're probably going to be more focused on the human nature aspects. Like Monster, you have probably more of a humanistic view of nature, whereas Death
Right,
Note, you probably have more of a religious slash humanistic slash religious humanistic idea of human nature.
right,
Um, in Steins Gate, you probably have compatibilism and incompatibilism along with
I have to watch that anime now. Yeah, go on. Yeah, yeah. I haven't watched
Uh,
Science Gate, but yeah, yeah, go on.
I haven't watched it, but I know the basic gist of it. So
Oh, all right, yeah. So
there are
they
some
introduce
anime.
compatibilism.
Hold
Or
on.
they talk about it in some sense because it is fascinating.
I think that was note 8. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, yeah. That's cool.
Uh, ah, 8. Compatibilism and incompatibilism. The first believes free will and determinism are not mutually exclusive, and
Yeah.
I wrote on my notes several Christian confessions hold to this, and Steins Gate is quite the example of both these ideas, the second of which being that they are, in fact, mutually exclusive. Thomas Hobbes was a uh, most likely heretical theological compatibilist. He believed
Right.
God was some sort of like physical essence matter, sort of like the force but personified. Well,
Right.
not
So we're talking about Thomas
personified.
Hobbes, the political guy, the guy who wrote Leviathan, or is it someone else?
Yeah, that's the right guy. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So human
But
nature is entirely corrupt. The guy who thought about that, as opposed to the Rousseauian view of the noble savage, we have Thomas Hobbes who said that humanity was entirely depraved and it's brutal, and you need government to
mhm,
give some sort of structure to society.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. Animalistic men, I guess, in some ways, given to their
yeah,
passions.
and it's interesting because once I saw the words determinism and free will, of course, I think of like John Kelvin and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
Kelvin and
obviously.
Hobbes, which is just
Huh.
funny to me.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's not a
It's just
connection I drew, but yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's just funny
yeah. We could
because
think of John Calvin and Calvin and Hobbes beard. Yeah, yeah. Go on.
yeah, no, Bill Watterson actually named them after John Kelvin and Thomas Hobbes, which is interesting. So that
Oh, oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that until I saw the Wikipedia article. I'm like, that's amazing. But now going back
It
to
is.
these comic
It,
books, I can see that.
I wish I did more of them, but yeah, go on. Yeah, yeah.
So,
Fascinating. Yeah, to think
but
of that.
tangent aside, the
Yeah,
compatibilism and the determinism and free will being compatible, like the Christian confessions. Let me see if I can find the Westminster Confession of Free Will here. I often quote this when people say Christians are just autonomous.
yeah.
I'm like,
Which is the popular view, I guess, apart from Reformed Baptists and a lot of Presbyterians, I guess, a lot, and maybe even Reformed Anglicans. A lot of denominations would hold to the autonomous view of human free will, in some sense, human autonomy.
I think that would probably depend on the person within the denominations.
Oh, I was talking about denominations as a whole. Yeah, yeah. People might differ. Yeah, because yeah, yeah, true.
Because
Although it is hard.
I've read these confessions a few times. I went through the three forms of unity, which is the Dutch Reformed, the that would include the Heidelberg Catechism, which was written in the
Right.
1500s,
Yeah.
the Canons of Dort, also 1500s, maybe 1600s. I'm not entirely sure, and the Belgic Confession.
Right.
Those are the three
Yeah.
forms of unity. And then the Lutheran Book of Concord, the 39 Articles of the Church of England, which is Anglican, um, the Westminster Confession of Faith,
Yeah.
and the 1689 London
London
Baptist
Baptist
Confession
Confession. Yeah.
of Faith.
All right. Yeah.
And then Westminster Confession of Free Will. God hath endured the will of man with that natural liberty that is neither forced nor by any absolute necessity of nature determined to good or evil. Deuteronomy 30:19, Matthew 17:12, James 1:14. 2. Man in his state of innocency had freedom and power to will and to do that which is good and well pleasing to God, but yet mutably so that he might fall from it. Genesis 1:26, Ecclesiastes 7:29, Genesis 2:16 through 17, and Genesis 3:6. 3. Man, by his fall into a state of sin, hath wholly lost all ability of will to any spiritual good accompanying salvation, so as a natural man, being altogether averse from that good and dead in sin, is not able by his own strength to convert himself or to prepare himself thereunto. John 15:5, Romans 5:6, etc., etc. 4. When God converts a sinner and translates him into the state of grace, he freeth him from his natural bondage under sin, and by his grace alone enables him freely to will and to do that which is spiritually good, yet so as that, by reason of his remaining corruption, he doth not perfectly nor only will that which is good, but doeth also will that which is evil. John 8:34, 36, Colossians 1:13, etc., etc. 5. The will of man is made perfectly and immutably free to good alone in the state of glory only. Ephesians 4:13, Hebrews 12:23, etc., etc., etc.
Right. Yeah.
That's the Presbyterian Confession.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any thoughts?
No, no, and I agree with that because, yeah, obviously, being a Calvinist myself, but the question would be, how is Steins Gate related to compatibilism? As in, do they, in some sense, invoke a deity who is uh, divinely sovereign over all and yet gives humanity a sort of will within that? Primary causation, secondary causation, is any of that depicted in Steins Gate? I mean, I was just asking because of
Uh,
compatibilism.
so minor spoilers. In Steins
Yeah,
Gate,
yeah.
the
Spoilers.
yeah, spoilers, listeners,
Yeah,
viewers.
yeah.
Um, in Steins Gate, the main character is trying to rescue this one person from tragedy by going back in time.
Right. Yeah.
And
That much I know. Yeah.
uh, he can't do it,
Right.
but he keeps trying. And there are points in the show where they make a point to show he can change this, he can change this, he can change small acts, but the true outcome is going to remain the same. So you can see
Right.
like determinism
Yeah.
and free
Yeah.
will are still compatible. He's still going back in time to try and change that,
Yeah.
but the outcome still remains the same.
Yeah. 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 We're talking more in the sense of humanistic compatibilism, but yeah, I guess compatibilism as such is portrayed in the anime.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. Right. Right.
And you can
And
still see the connection of humanistic compatibilism and theological
absolutely.
compatibilism.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's where a lot of people would disagree with us when we talk about compatibilism because they'd argue no, that makes man ultimately not responsible for his evil acts. But I guess that's where creator creation distinction comes in and all of that. But yeah, yeah, uh,
I
that's a
think
good, yeah.
earlier, just a second ago, you said it would make them not responsible for their own actions. Is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah. The objection given by a lot of people to compatibilism is that compatibilistic view of God's sovereignty would make men not responsible, not culpable for their sins, because they seem to view God's handling of history as a sort of micromanaging type of stuff. You've heard the same thing in if you listen to the Unbelievable podcast, we would have had Molinism and Calvinism, William Lane Craig and James White uh, talking
Okay.
about yeah that, and this was
I,
the major
I've
point
seen
of
a
concern.
I've seen a
Yeah,
little bit of William Lane Craig and James White. I will admit that I'm not the biggest fan of either of them.
right. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of JW. But
Nice.
either way,
I
the
can
whole
respect it.
discussion.
I
Yeah.
still respect him,
Yeah.
but he is a
Uh,
Baptist.
yeah, yeah, I know. All the good ones are, we're all Baptists. But yeah, coming back to the point. Um, yeah, so during the discussion, the main argument from WLC was that, this makes God the author of evil, as That was his major contention. This makes God the author of evil. This makes God the author of evil. How can you say that God sovereignly ordains all of that and still say that man is responsible? Because if God sovereignly ordains all of this, then the first sin would have to be divinely ordained, and therefore the whole of humanity's fall into sin, divinely ordained, and thus God is the author of sin. And I find that no, the reason I say I find that funny is because there is the authorial model of divine providence in which God would be sort of like Shakespeare, and he includes evil in his place, but that doesn't make him culpable for the evil in those places. It is just that the evil exists to show how awesome the good is in some sense, to show the redemption, the greatness of redemption, the glory of redemption, and all of that. So the authorial model of divine providence would be, I guess, an answer to critics who say that that makes God the author of sin. But yeah, there is the other objection that it also makes men not culpable, because ultimately it's God who micromanages all of that. That's the major objection that people bring when we talk about compatibilism, I guess.
I think I have three responses to your objections.
Right.
I think the first one would probably be something along your Shakespeare line of thought. I think C.S. Lewis kind of had a similar idea. As you can probably tell, I'm a huge fan of C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, yeah, I've got that by now. Yeah.
I probably have most of his stuff.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Yeah,
I'll,
and I
I'll show
read your
you.
Facebook post too, where we, yeah, because I
Oh,
had
you
some
saw
questions
that.
about it. You remember,
Nice.
and yeah, and I asked you a couple of questions about C.S. Lewis because I'd heard about some of his certain quirky, shall we say, doctrinal beliefs, and
Yeah,
so
he
yeah,
held to
yeah,
a few of them, but not quite the ones people thought he believed,
right, yeah,
which
true,
irks me a little.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
gonna lie. But he said that God looks at time that he created sort of like a single page instead of a book. Like he sees all of it at once. There's no present, past, or future. It's all just there.
yeah,
So it's not like he's writing history or being a watchmaker and just allowing, just wearing the watch, letting the time go by. He's like,
yeah,
oh, yeah, this is it. This
yeah,
is
yeah,
this is the page, right?
yeah,
And C.S. Lewis goes further in like Miracles and Weight of Glory and The Great Divorce, where he's like, oh, God can interact with this page. He can take a pen, he can annotate, he can do whatever.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
supernaturalism is an extension of naturalism.
right, yeah, yeah,
Second objection I would probably make is, and I've done this with a few people at my workplace,
yeah,
to and like they're like, when that make God culpable for their sins, I'm like, if you gave birth, if you had a son and he grew up to be a murderer, would you be culpable for his sins? I'm like, no, you wouldn't be. And then I think the third objection, for especially for like the time loop that Steins Gate presents and its concept and idea, would
yeah,
probably be like, no, the time isn't the problem. It's, or even the fact that it's there. It's just, man, how do I articulate that one? Trying to find the words for this. If I think the thing with Steins Gate is, I think the death caused in that time trip, that original time loop that he's going towards,
yeah,
is his fault. He's culpable for that. He set that true time tunnel himself. God didn't do that. He did that. So he's still culpable. God isn't.
yeah, 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 yeah,
If he
right.
never made that mistake in the first place,
Yeah, it's on him. It's on him. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Although the second objection might be, I guess, the parent and child objection might have some people saying that while the parent is not directly responsible, the way they raised him would be part of the reason why he ended up being a murderer. So I guess that would be an
I love
objection
that
to
you
that
brought that up
objection.
because Monster goes into that heavily.
Oh yeah,
Really,
you
it's
know, yeah.
fantastic.
You make me want to see this anime again and again the way you describe it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It, it,
Awesome.
it- I think you really enjoy it.
Oh, yeah,
But
yeah,
Dr. Tenma, the guy who's been framed, well, made to not so much framed as to look like he actually did these murders,
yeah,
um, he's always helping people. He's like he doesn't believe that people are inherently evil. He believes everybody is born innocent
yeah,
and naturally inclined towards good. Whereas again, the main antagonist of the series is no, everybody's inclined natural inclination is towards evil, which we as
yeah,
Christians would agree with,
yeah, yeah.
but we would agree with the actions under common grace that Dr.
Yeah.
Tenma is closer to the truth.
Right, because God
Whereas they both,
restricts the evil. Yeah, yeah. Because
Mhm,
yeah, yeah. Because otherwise we would have men tearing each other down. We would have the Hobbesian universe in some sense.
yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, but it's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I have to
So,
check this anime out. Yeah.
so we did a little
Right.
bit of postmodernity.
Right, right. So here's the point. The the reason I brought up this yeah, we were talking about cultural anime as a cultural phenomenon, and how depictions of good and evil, and in this case, human depravity, and even compatibilism, would be mentioned in anime, and we even touched on the authorial model of providence, and I guess that's fascinating because you would see really awesome anime wherein there would be evil characters
Mhm,
who are there for a reason, and the reason is to show how good the positive guys are, and to bring out a beautiful tapestry, a beautiful cohesive unit as a whole. And I guess that's the authorial model, and that's how wonderful art can be if used in the right ways.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And on that note, which is that anime has got all of these awesome stuff going on, and the way they depict certain Christian notions, Christian ideals of good and evil, justice and injustice. There is also moral ambiguity depicted in anime, right? In Death Note, we see moral ambiguity clearly on display.
I think that's Death Note's one of the utilitarianism ideologies, right?
Right, as far as I've seen, I haven't seen the whole thing,
Okay,
but yeah, yeah. The point up to which I've seen and the fact that I've read most of it does seem to lend towards a more utilitarian idea of how yeah, human virtue ought to be. Seems to me the Sam Harris sort of view,
okay.
moral landscape kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah, which
I am familiar with Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, um, that does seem to be the case. And here's a question: wouldn't almost all of anime lend itself towards the utilitarian perspective, considering their base point? Because Japanese culture as a whole seems to me to be, well, effectively atheistic in some sense. I mean, they might have some sort of organized religion, but at the end of it, they seem to be a more secular minded culture. And as such, it seems to me that their moral structure would be utilitarian, wouldn't it?
Whew. I'm not Japanese, so it's only conjecture.
Yeah, obviously, yeah, yeah. It's just based on the anime that I've seen, it doesn't seem to me to be the case, and it's a question that I've been wondering about because
Yeah.
I know for a fact that they're not extremely religious, and it's not against them or anything. It's just the way that culture seems to work. It seems to me that they're more secular minded. They seem to have a more secular view of life, and as such,
I
uh,
would agree with you. They have a more secular minded view of life, but I would also say that they probably have a more appreciation and respect and even tolerance for other concepts in
oh,
general
absolutely, yeah,
than we as a Western culture have been in the
yeah.
last, I don't know, since the 18th, since the Enlightenment.
Yeah, although you're the ones who keep talking about tolerance. In fact, the most. Every single time you see tolerance being lifted up, and the
Yeah,
intolerance of tolerance now being almost unbearable at this point. But
I know, right?
but
Immediately move away from the topic. Let's go. Take a car and drive.
yeah, because you guys seem to love talking about it, but doesn't seem to be out there much. Yeah, but yeah, the point being, yeah, they seem to be able to integrate a whole lot. They seem to be able to integrate cultures, integrate ideas. They use a lot of Christian imagery in anime,
Mhm.
and
And not even
and
because it's Christian, just because it looks cool.
yeah, because it looks cool, and they find it easy to incorporate ideas from cultures while not losing the essence of the anime or their own culture for that matter. And it's fabulous. It's fascinating. But
Hmm.
even so, having uh, absorbed or having used all of these ideas, wouldn't the fundamental core still be in some sense utilitarian, similar to a Western conception currently, as the West is moving towards atheism? One would assume that utilitarianism would be the moral framework by which we view whether something is good or evil, as we see in Hollywood depictions of right and wrong. But it seems to me that anime doesn't really follow the utilitarian mindset, at least in some sense. They seem to hold to a transcendent view of good and evil. There still seems to be the the last remaining, I guess, drags maybe, but there still seems to me this view of a traditional morality underpinning many anime that I
Hmm.
see, and that to me is fascinating. Do you have any thoughts on that? And
I think
how that
that's
could be?
I think one of the biggest ones for that is probably gonna be like the big three, like the two of the big three,
Oh,
Bleach and Naruto, where they literally have demons inside of them.
ah,
Like
yeah, yeah, the supernatural. Yeah,
the inner
yeah,
evil inside of their inside of their bodies. Like it's an inner evil. Like we're born with evil. We're born in
right.
sin.
Yeah, yeah,
In my mother's womb, in sin, my mother conceived me.
conceived me. Yeah, yeah,
And I think that truth is still resonant somehow by God's common grace
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
in
that's
that
that's
culture.
yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
I think
Even though they did not
it's
know God. Yeah, yeah. The
it's
verse.
starting to play with that, I think a little, like in terms of like the concepts of like Monster and Death Note and like, oh, it's starting to realize, oh, we can play with this.
Yeah, yeah. We can make it as ambiguous as we can. We can, yeah. But there is the sense of human depravity at the beginning in a
Hmm.
lot of these anime that you mentioned. Yes, yes, it is. It is fascinating. Truly, yeah, yeah. Extremely fascinating culture and view of right and wrong, which, yeah,
And even concerning like the right and wrong, they have that, and then they have the honor system as well, which
yeah, yeah,
they have to balance with the moral code, which
exactly.
I didn't realize this when I first watched it, but I was a little upset with one of the characters in Bleach for his kind of snobbish, prudish
Disrespect.
ways. And
Yeah,
basically, what looked to me through Western lenses as strange disrespect and ultimately hatred towards his family. I'm like, the more I study the Japanese culture and the Japanese language, I'm like, oh, this means that.
yeah,
I get
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true.
One
And
of the song, like the intro song that plays throughout that arc, one of the intro songs,
yeah,
it's the heavy metal theme.
yeah.
Um, the first hard rock theme, really. It's not heavy metal, it's more hard rock or heavy rock. The
Hmm.
name of that is Ishirin no Hana, which literally means something like my precious little one flower.
Oh,
That
okay.
that's
Yeah.
his sister,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
who who is trying, who the rest of the Soul Society, the big moral government of that anime are trying to execute.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
got to come to grips with that somehow. And then
Yeah.
Ichigo, the orange haired kid, is like, nope,
Nope,
Western
it's
dude's
not
gonna
happening.
take us out to that. Western philosophy and an Eastern dude is gonna take us out to that. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
it's very interesting. I'm like, that is so cool. I never noticed that before. And now I have more respect for that. So
Yeah. 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 That kind of respect towards the elderly seems to be inculcated very young in Eastern cultures. It's here as well, not to the extent as it is in Japan, but it's still common here that you ought to have a natural respect towards the elderly, and you call them by various titles
mhm.
because you want to show your respect towards them, which I guess isn't that common in Western culture. So I guess there would be a difference there. Fascinating. Yeah. All right. So if anime is art, and since anime is art, and anime is also a cultural phenomenon, and we see how that plays out in terms of morality, in terms of justice, in terms of compatibilism, and all of that. Here's George Orwell coming in and saying all art is propaganda. So from that perspective, is
Wait, we're going now from all that to communism?
not necessarily. We're just going to propaganda.
I'm sorry, whenever I think of propaganda, I immediately think of the red flag with the hammer and sickle.
Fascinating, yeah. Because is back home. Yeah, yeah, that's not. Ah, yeah. Anyway, all art is propaganda. Says George Orwell. It's all anime propaganda.
No, I don't think I'd say all of it's propaganda. I think I'd say um most of it is promoted, most of it is used to promote thinking.
True. Yeah, but here's the thing, and I used to think that all art wasn't propaganda, but um,
That
everyone
being
would
said,
have, yeah,
did you see that one review I did last year?
of
That one with like the Disney like animation, it was black and white, and it was that one of the first ones post World War.
oh yeah, I've heard about that, and how
I
they
forgot.
wanted to bash the Americans. So that was clearly propaganda.
That was definitely a propaganda film. It was one of the
Absolutely.
first anime
Yeah,
ever
yeah,
from Japan.
yeah. Which is blatantly.
It was blatant
You
propaganda.
have, yeah, yeah. Go
It
against
was
it.
it ends with the children, like the animal
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
children.
Oh yeah.
The
Yeah.
anim
True. Absolutely.
literally doing
Oh.
somersaults, landing on America,
Oh yeah. Yeah. But
practicing
but that's but
skydiving.
that's it. That's a very overt form of propaganda. We're
Yeah,
talking about subtle forms of propaganda because let's take Hollywood. A lot of people would say that there is a propaganda in Hollywood. I don't know if I agree or not, but there would be a lot of people who say that there is a definite propaganda within the Hollywood community, and they're trying to push a certain narrative forward. It's not overt because if it were, then almost everyone would have caught on it. But not everyone would agree, even agree with that idea. But there is an undercurrent of the view that Hollywood does push a certain propaganda, and I guess that's how I view this quote, this book by George Orwell. He uses a lot of authors, and he says that while you might think that this is not propaganda, there is a subtle core of propaganda within it, and it's not good or evil. It's just there. And I guess that's what I was wondering, because would there be something like that in anime? But here's where that might not be the case. If we are to assume that almost all of anime, at least the major chunk of what we call anime, is post-war, and if we were to agree with the postmodernists like Jean-François Lyotard, who might say that all of post-war culture is postmodern, in the sense that there is an objective, or there is a strong dislike towards a meta narrative, uh, then since all of anime is post-war, and since post-war culture is against meta narratives, they might not be propaganda driven because there is no meta narrative. So,
yeah, yeah.
so
I can
we,
see that.
So we've got, I guess, two conflicting notions. On one side, you've got George Orwell, who says that almost all of art is propaganda, and then you've got postmodernists who might argue that since there is no grand narrative, uh, how do you drive propaganda without a grand narrative for pushing something forward? And
Let's see. I have an idea. I think that is going to depend on your definition of propaganda.
right,
And
exactly.
Google
It will.
defines
It
this as
certainly will.
information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view.
Right.
So if it's biased or misleading and is a political point of view to promote. So I think if it's like
From
an
that perspective, yeah.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, go on.
almost like an underhanded sort of thing, where have you seen those memes where like, hey, hey mom, can I go to this place? And mom's like, no, we got this at home.
Oh
Have you
yeah,
seen
we
those?
got this at home, and this at home
Yeah.
is yeah,
And
yeah,
this at home is something completely different from
yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
That's kind of
Yeah,
what
true.
propaganda in my mind is.
Yeah, yeah. And from I guess from that perspective, no, anime is not propaganda driven because certainly there is no they're not trying to mislead anyone, at least not on any superficial level. You wouldn't assume that anime is trying to mislead or drive a political point. But
No, and I don't think
yeah,
philosophical points are inherently propaganda
propaganda
either.
driven. But isn't man a political animal, and thus whatever he puts out would have some links to politics because there would be the undercurrent of a political view, even if that's not blatantly pushed forward. And I was wondering, I'm just thinking out loud. In that case, wouldn't there be some view of this political view is right, and this is not all that right? Would that be propaganda in some way? We are stretching the definitions of propaganda now, and I do wonder if we've gone beyond the definitions. But I'm just because at this point all art would be propaganda. Was that what George Orwell was driving towards? But yeah, it's fun to think about. That's why I put that out. What do you make of it?
I like the idea of like, I think his question is all art propaganda is probably the essence of postmodernity in general, because he's like, hey, this exists, let's question the purpose of it.
Right,
Because what
right,
truth is
yeah,
there? What truth is
yeah,
in this?
yeah,
Is that actually truth? Is there a meta narrative, as you said earlier?
yeah, yeah.
And if something is being promoted for its truth, wouldn't we reject that anyway? If it Because postmodernity is supposed to reject the meta narrative and replace it for a localized narrative.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. It is. It is supposed to reject all of that, and that's why. Yeah, yeah. Because there's this absolutely wonderful quote in this. Have you read something by oh, I forget the name. Was it? Yeah, Hiroki Azuma. And there's a book by this author called Otaku. And I love this book because it talks about it's about database animals. And let me just quote something from that. This just give us an idea of what it's talking about. Here's the idea. Um, the personal pronoun otaku fulfills the function of mutually endorsing the fantasy of group affiliation. For the otaku, certainly the fictional is taken far more seriously than social reality, and the media often conclude from this kind of observation that otaku cannot distinguish between reality and games. However, such a conclusion is imprudent. Since not all otaku are mental patients, it follows that they generally possess the ability to distinguish between fiction and reality. Their preference for fiction is related to their identity. And yes, here's the ultimate point. Otaku shut themselves into the hobby community not because they deny sociality, but rather because as social values and standards are already dysfunctional, they feel a pressing need to construct alternative values and standards. This is a postmodern characteristic because the process by which coexistence of countless smaller standards replace the loss of the singular and vast social standard corresponds precisely to the decline of the grand narrative identified by Jean-Francois Lyotard.
Nice. I love that. You're gonna have to send me a link for that book.
Yeah, yeah, it's an awesome book. I'll send you the link. So, so this
Sick.
is the quote, right? Yeah, and I find that fascinating because that's true, right? In some sense, the otaku subculture that is we talk about and is seen to be viewed by the media as some sort of shut-in community. And while that might be true in some sense, there is a a whole lot of there are a whole lot of people who might be considered otaku who delve into the culture because of the social value it provides, because of the localized narratives that it provides, where they find a lot more social interaction other than the real social network that's supposedly out there.
Yeah, I think I agree with that because as you were reading that quote, I'm like, oh, look at that. He is describing like the essence again of postmodernity. It's like
Yeah,
they're finding a group
yeah.
and
Within
replacing
a larger, yeah,
within a
yeah,
larger group to replace,
the supposedly larger meta narrative,
yeah,
and
with another localized one.
yeah, and delve into this one. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
fantastic.
absolutely. And that's why I wanted to put this out today because a lot of people might consider us otakus, although I guess yeah, we wouldn't be in the definitional sense. So
Well,
because it
I definitely wouldn't ascribe to postmodernism.
no, no, yeah, and that's the point. Because postmodernism, in its political the demonstrations and its political forms, is certainly not a wonderful doctrine. It has a lot of issues,
Well,
but
there's no absolutes.
yeah, there's no absolutes, absolutely. But
I see what you did there.
yeah, but it is also true that it is a cultural condition. And Frederick Jameson and all of these guys, when they talk about it, it is true that culture has been driven to a point that people distrust grand narratives. If that's capitalism or socialism or fascism or any of these isms that people have brought out and supposedly are all encompassing, people finally realize that no, it's really not the case, and so there is this distrust certainly towards meta narratives, Christianity included, and that certainly makes you realize why people might find themselves attracted to smaller communities where there are these values that you can share. And I guess that would go for Marvel community or any of these small close-in communities of fans of a particular genre, fans of a particular um, series or anything who find social interactions within that community way more pleasant and way more agreeable than the outside reality, so to speak. And I guess that's a postmodern condition.
I think so. And then I think while we're on the topic, I think this aspect of postmodernism is kind of tied to the idea of structuralism, where they're tied, everybody is
Absolutely.
connected
Yeah.
by like the idea of language and
Yeah.
shared
And
cultures.
yeah, yeah. And linguistic relativity also, because
Yeah.
yeah, if you really can't find the truth within a given text, then is there truth as a whole, or is it just a
hmm
construct of that culture which produced the language?
hmm
Right. Yeah. Yeah. True. And
Awesome.
yeah, and I guess that's why us we find a lot of fun in engaging in online communities of anime lovers because of the shared culture, the shared uh, mm, preferences we have. And I guess that is in some sense a postmodern condition. It wouldn't have been the case I guess 60 or 70 years ago. Uh, people wouldn't have enjoyed being in such a community as people
hmm
do right now. So it is fascinating.
Yeah, it is definitely very. It my the rest of my family were like, "Oh, hey, is this popular now?" I'm like, "Yeah, it is."
Yeah, 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 yeah. All that's true, right? I mean, it's not that popular here, but still people love to look at it and say, "Oh yeah, Attack on Titan." In fact, some of our creators here are using the songs from Attack on Titan and some of the memes and stuff, and including them in Malayalam skits. Malayalam being our language, and the cultural the, the mishmash that produces is fascinating. So you've got the Japanese anime, you've got usually the English dub of it, and then you've got our own Malayalam culture. Drive them all and mix them all together. You stir the pot, and out you have whatever. But it's fascinating.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
yeah.
have to see some of that memes along with your
Uh,
pronunciation of the Malayalam script.
Absolutely, I'll send those to you.
Tech and Titan memes are the best.
Yeah.
All
Right,
right, so we
right.
talked about postmodernity, and I kind of
Yeah.
want to talk about its follow-up, post-secularism,
Oh, yeah.
which I think is
Because
interesting. Um, Faith, religious slash reason, and secular, if that's a thing, reasoning and logic can coexist and at times morally unsuccessful. Um, some people use this term to refer to the beginning of postmodernity. I wrote John Lennox, but I also want to make the case that G.K. Chesterton might be one of the fathers of post-secularism because he came out
there's a lot of the
pretty much,
Orthodox.
yeah, like his stuff like orthodoxy,
Yeah.
heretics,
Right. Right.
maybe even the Everlasting Man, which I have on my shelf but haven't quite read yet. But
So how would you go about because this is fascinating. So in a post-secular age, how would a person view um recent logic in connection to faith as we spoke of? Because as we know, they've been seen as completely divided in the modern age in some sense because reason and logic were tools for humans to thrive, and faith, whatever it is, was to be kept in the was to be very personal.
mhm,
Postmodernism came in, and even reason and logic took a hit because they were tools of the white culture, and therefore not necessarily absolute truths, because these were all recent logic dialogues where Western conceptions, and they held value because of power structures and because Western culture had, I guess, more power. There were power imbalances, and Western culture drove all of culture, and therefore reason and logic were the standards. But that should not be the case, say the postmodernists. But now we've reached or talked about post-secularism, and I find that fascinating because there is a confluence of faith and reason and
mhm.
logic in some sense.
And I think it's kind of closer to what. Ah, man, how do I phrase that? I think it is an ideal that is a step closer than what we talked about earlier, what humanism is, right? We went
Yeah, yeah.
where humanism has like all those different philosophies. Let me see where my notes on that. I have too many notes. That's what I have. Oh, we'll get to that in a minute. We'll jump back. Humanism is a democratic and ethical life stance which affirms that human beings have the right and responsibility to give meaning and shape to their own lives. It stands for the building of a more humane society through an ethic based on human and other cultural values in the spirit of reason and free inquiry through human capabilities. It is not theistic and does
Right.
not accept supernatural views of reality.
Yeah, yeah.
That is from the what's it called? The International Humanist and Ethical Union, which actually has their own website. if anyone wants to take a look at that.
Yeah.
But post-secularism is like, hey, you can have that and faith and reason. And I would also
Right.
argue Christian humanism and Christian existentialism get more into this,
Yeah. Yeah.
but reason and faith are not mutually exclusive. They are
Absolutely.
compatibilist. They're compatible.
In fact, one might argue that you need faith to have reason. Because
Which I
yeah.
think
Yeah.
which I think John Lennox is also a proponent of, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
As well as C.S. Lewis, Chesterton, which I think was one of the first.
I guess the first would be Augustine when he said "Credo et
Yes,
intelligum." Yeah. So
yeah,
I believe, therefore I
Augustine,
understand. Yeah.
Aquinas.
Although Aquinas might adhere to a more of a reason-based faith model in some sense,
hmm
as opposed to the Augustinian model. It is fascinating
But
to
they just show
think
that
about.
that you can still have both. Doesn't matter which
Oh,
order.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I was just saying, I was just mentioning the primacy of faith in
Yeah.
trying to grasp reason. That it does seem to me to be the case that apart from starting with the acknowledgement of a triune God of the universe, reason as a whole might not have a standing. But yeah,
hmm
yeah, yeah. As opposed to secular humanism, certainly this is a trend in the right direction because
hmm
uh, if you can, if there is, if the fact that faith and reason can coexist is shown to be the case, which is the case, and then I guess it helps move the discussion forward rather than being stuck in this trench where people keep throwing rocks at each other. Here is faith, here is reason.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, I was able to find a lot of stuff on filmmakers and authors for postmodernism, and it's
Yeah,
surprisingly
yeah.
difficult to find like a consensus of stuff for post-secularism.
Absolute. Oh,
I'm
yeah. Even
like,
if it was modernism in some sense. I mean, because you read one author and you get a simulacrum, and then you read another author and then you go.
I'm like, is this
So,
postmodernism or is this like absurdism, existentialism, or
yeah,
humanism? Like, or is it all of them?
the whole thing is confusing. Yeah, but
Yeah.
because I guess that is the modern condition. You get confused out of your mind, and thus you
Yes.
reach nirvana.
Uh, no, I think it's a state of confusion based on the concept of not believing anything. You have no reason, you have no faith in your reason.
Yeah, if no faith in reason, so maybe psychedelics might help. I guess.
Who knew we get jokes in here?
Yeah.
That's great. This is awesome.
Yeah.
All right. I'm having a ton of fun. Where do you want to go from here?
Yeah. Yeah. So we've covered. I've no idea. We started with anime. We started with anime as a cultural phenomenon, then art, and then justice and injustice. We've reached postmodernism. So
Post. We've done
and
postmodernism,
post-secularism to
post-secularism.
post-secularism
We've done humanism and Christian. Have we done Christian humanism?
in small patches, I believe.
Let me see. I might have this. Oh man.
Have you a note on Christian humanism?
I know that one of my favorite books is written by a man largely contributed as one of the biggest proponents of Christian humanism, and that is Desiderius Erasmus.
Ah,
And I have a copy of The Praise of Folly,
awesome. Right. Yeah.
and it is
Yeah.
annotated, and I love it. It is, I haven't read it in probably 2 years, but I remember it being one of my absolute favorites.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
I,
So
I like
how does he describe Christian humanism?
um let's see. I think there was a page.
Because here's a question that I want to ask when you describe Christian humanism. Erasmus, writing in the 1500s, would have had an idea of humanism that is certainly not the case of the humanism that we have now, because humanism back in the 1500s was certainly human endeavor to understand God's works in a clearer fashion, right?
Mhm.
To understand God's world better, to understand how He created the whole universe in a more clearer, coherent fashion. That would have been humanism in the
Mhm.
1500s, as opposed to humanism in 2000, where it's just just about humans, and a very secular idea, which clearly was not the case in Erasmus's time. So, how do you describe Christian humanism? How does it move forward? How does the idea of Christian humanism make it more Christian in the 1500s?
Let me see. I think. Yeah, I agree with you that the secular humanism of his day was probably definitely different from the secular humanism we have now.
Yeah,
Because I think they still had an idea of what's it called? Like
God is a creator. They live in a created
they
universe,
had
and
the idea of post-secularism without having gone through postmodernism.
or even modernism for that matter.
Yeah, exactly right.
Let's just
Uh,
skip the hard parts.
yeah, Christian humanism was a movement with optimism toward the goodness of humanity, growing through the Renaissance's development of resurgence of Greco-Roman interest in the 14th, 16th century. Explore the philosophy of humanism and its relation to the Protestant Reformation and Christian faith of the time. Does that sound about right to you?
I didn't hear the last sentence. Christian humanism. The last
Uh,
sentence.
explore the philosophy of humanism and its relation to the Protestant Reformation and Christian faith of the time.
Oh, oh,
I
so
know,
it's connected to
uh,
the Protestant Reformation.
yeah, it's interesting because if you read The Bondage of the Will by Martin Luther, he
You
and
wouldn't,
Erasmus didn't
yeah,
really get along
get
very
on.
well.
Yeah.
Uh, that being said, Martin Luther was actually kind of nice to the guy. He didn't verbally
Compared
insult
to
him.
compared to his other
I was just,
fascinating interactions, where
yeah,
all
he
sorts
only,
of wonderful invectives were thrown out.
yeah, he only called him like, I don't know, like a worthless pig with a nose ring or something. That was it.
Yeah, I mean that's tame in comparison. He
Yeah, I
liked the
know, right?
guy. Amazing.
I know, maybe it was all Erasmus's studying of Greek that he appreciated. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. But
Um,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense considering the Renaissance, and how human development was seen as wonderful, and how human ability was almost raised to a level. It seems to me to be the case that an optimistic view of Christianity might have been Christian humanism. So we can do all of these things. We're able to do a whole lot more than we thought we were capable of, because of the resurgence of Greco-Roman literature, because of the resurgence of Renaissance art and even science. So human capacity was being found out, human potential being understood in ways that were never known before, and that seemed to have struck a chord with the Christians, who I guess wanted to mix Christianity with this optimistic view of the future. Thinking about postmillennialism now, but thinking of this optimism, and I guess an optimistic view of Christianity. But the reason to, I guess, take a step back might be this. This might have fueled a view of humanity that might not have been entirely consistent with the doctrine of total depravity in some ways. Is that right?
I think based on the annotations within his own praise of folly, I think I would agree with that. I think I would agree
Right.
with your understanding of where that idea of total depravity was starting to kind of leave.
Yeah. That was my sense too, because this is fascinating. It's just that human potential might have been given a bit too much of thrust,
Mhm.
although that might have been necessary had the reformers, maybe because the reformers might have been a bit too on the negative side. I don't know. You can do nothing. You're gone. It's all dust and bones now. So that, that wasn't the case. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah. I wonder. And and would such a view have led inevitably to enlightenment? Because if you can do, if human potential is so vast and so boundless, let's say.
Hmm. Well, if you go away from total depravity and get rid of that, you probably can replace it with total ability,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you're able to do a whole lot of stuff, and you're not really hindered by the effects of sin, noetic or otherwise, because
Hmm.
they might have adhered to the view of depravity as such as it is a moral aspect, but I wonder if they acknowledge the noetic effect of sin in our minds, because that would also have been the case, right? So while intellectual pursuits were awesome, intellectual pursuits without, or rather,
Hmm.
disconnected with the idea of the triune God might
Hmm.
not have been the best move forward. I'm just wondering. Well, this is one to think about. I ought to, yeah, we really ought to think about Christian humanism a whole lot more. It seems fascinating, and it seems to me to be where, if post-secularism is a modern condition, maybe that's where we're headed to. I don't know.
That would be definitely an interesting episode.
Yeah, anime as Christian humanism.
I was thinking more along the lines of Praise of Folly by Desiderius Erasmus.
Oh, yeah, yeah, true. We maybe discussing that too, because I brought about anime because anime
Well, I
certainly
meant
has
that like
Christian
for another
conceptions.
episode.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Like you can, I might be able to find you a copy.
Yeah, I need a copy because I can't get a copy here. I
I
need
might be able
one
to
for.
send you a few. I might be able to send you a few recordings.
Oh,
It's public domain.
right. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think you'd like it. I think you'd like
yeah.
that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. We'll
Um.
get into that. Yeah.
uh,
Right.
So
I have no idea where we are right now. We've reached Erasmus from Monster. So yeah, that's one stretch.
we've done Cardcaptor Sakura and like postmodernity. We've done Steins Gate and compatibilism and
Yeah,
incompatibilism and determinism and free will.
yeah.
Um, we've done Christian humanism and humanism. Trying to think of some anime that might.
Tie it all together. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Now let me tell you
Yes, yes,
why this anime is the best.
yes. So good.
Yeah. It is the greatest anime of all time.
We can even go
Although,
into just war theory in that too.
oh yeah, yeah, because I'd never really looked into that until I saw your video, the video you shared with me, the one about Nietzsche and
Hmm.
Nietzsche and
She has a great playlist.
Berserk. Yeah, and down there was just war theory for Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. And yeah, yeah, I hadn't thought about that for some time. Anyway, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is an amazing anime, and it does get into a lot of the themes that we talked about. It certainly gets into a lot of philosophy. It gets
Hmm.
into the humanistic conceptions and transcendental notions when it delves into scientism
Hmm.
extremely well.
Which you
It
have done a
gets,
video on.
yeah, yeah, which I've done a video on, guys. Check that out as well.
Yeah,
I'll put the
check it
links to
out.
it somewhere.
It's
Yeah.
good.
It also gets into this thing between uh, this idea of race and individual sin versus collective sin, which I think is
Yes.
a very fascinating topic, right? Because a lot of anime would shy away from it. A lot of modern Hollywood would not even depict it, but
Hmm.
it is a topic to discuss, and they've done it really well. While it certainly is true that there is the collective uh, aspect to sin, it's always the individual that's at the end of it, and you cannot, or at least you should not, tie the blame of the individual to the whole community and then blame it all on them. It certainly wouldn't be right, and I am fascinated by how Hiromu Arakawa did that wonderfully well in the depictions of Ishval in Civil War, and how they reconcile at the end, Ishval and Amestris. Amazing stuff, I
Hmm.
guess. And also the conception of truth,
Hmm.
and
Yes.
yeah, the transcendent nature of truth as a whole, truly amazing. Not seen in many anime, although they do have transcendent ideas. This one show transcendent nature of truth as a whole. That truth is outside of human perceptions, which I guess
Mm.
is a very true notion because we're now living in the realm of your truth and my truth, and I guess Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood dealt a blow to that aspect when it talked about truth as being transcendent.
Hmm.
And
And yet it's still somehow personal, of a
and
personal
yet it's
transcend.
fascinating. So the immanence and the transcendence together, which is
Yes, because everybody
quite
has their own door, right?
yeah. True, that's true.
You can tell I've watched both the adaptations.
I know. Right, right. It's an amazing anime. It deals with a whole lot. We have to dedicate a single episode to Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood and all of the philosophy behind it, because I think we can go in a whole lot with that. I think it lends itself to a certain Jewish conception of religion, which Hiromu Arakawa talked about, and
Yes.
obviously it lends itself to the philosophy of truth, and we might get into forms and such, the idea of forms, the theory of forms. Maybe talk about how views on mathematics and logic are not necessarily invented as much as they are discovered, because I think there is a line to that in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and of course
Yes.
the connection between science and religion, and science being driven for its own ends, which will almost inevitably lead to disastrous consequences, as we see in the Third Reich, and also as we see in the Masters and
It's
Destroy.
interesting that because yeah, scientism negative aspect of that is seen was way more devastating in the original TV adaptation, which goes away from the manga.
Oh, oh, yeah, true.
And it's spoilers for those who haven't listened. So maybe skip ahead 5 minutes if you haven't seen that. 'Cause I would highly recommend you go watch that.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome anime.
Nah, yes. But, and if you don't care about spoilers, here it is. It's revealed that their powers of alchemy are derived from souls of the real world or the alternate
Right,
world
right.
without
Yeah,
alchemy.
yeah, yeah.
And
So
like,
the underground, yeah. So that's where you get the power from, and,
yeah.
and that's just
And
people's
like,
souls.
and that's scientism. It's like, whoa, that's dark.
Yeah, it certainly is. And when I see people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and others pushing forth an idea of scientism in government, they say that, all you need is a couple of scientists and you get the thing done. I'm like, no, no, it's not how it ends. We've seen how that kind of thing ends. You
Yes.
really don't want to go there.
Yeah, well, they created homunculi. That didn't work
Yeah, they
out.
create homunculi. So you really want us to create homunculi? You really want to go down that path?
Well, we're already
But
doing that
yeah,
with the AI too, right?
yeah, yeah.
And did
And
you
I'm
see
pretty sure.
that creepy AI video the other day?
Which
Where
one?
the AI, it's the one that says, you should have never created us.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I recall seeing that somewhere. Yeah.
I
Wow.
just saw the thumbnail from it. I'm like, ooh, that's scary.
You know, and it's fascinating because people who create this don't seem to have watched science fiction movies, because they all have this. I mean, every single science fiction movies have this concept. You don't even have to watch Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Watch an old
Yeah.
science fiction stuff and you'll see how this thing ends. But but yeah.
Terminator, Matrix, everything.
You know what's fascinating about scientism? J.P. Moreland wrote that book, Scientism and Secularism. We just talked about secularism, and it's secularism that gives rise to scientism. Without a transcendent basis, you end up with science as the transcendent, and that leads to all of these crazy views. So,
Interesting. I can
yeah,
see, I think I can see that. And that is fascinating.
yeah, yeah, right. So we've gone everywhere, and it's I've no idea how long
Talked a
we've
lot of,
refreshed this. Yeah, we refreshed this.
we've,
We've gone on for about 1 hour 45 minutes. It's been amazing. I love talking with you, mate.
oh,
And
you're fantastic. You're so much fun to talk to, dude. I'm,
you too. And I want to do
loving
this
this.
again and again because I have no idea where people would start and end with this discussion because we've gone a lot. But this is fascinating, and
We should probably talk a little bit more about anime.
yeah.
We're having so much fun with the
Yeah, because
philosophy.
I started with anime, and so guys, this is about anime. You know, this for those of you still listening, this is about anime. You see my picture in the back. It's this school temple. It's all about anime. It's just that we've gone. I have no idea where, but it's still anime. Still focused on anime.
Yes.
So yeah, awesome talk, Jacob. I've had a really fun time talking with you. I want to talk with you again. We'll discuss. I don't even know what we'll discuss. I'm not gonna put a name to it because I'm pretty sure we won't stick to it. We'll go berserk. But
Nice.
but yeah, it's been awesome having this time talking with you, mate. And I will discuss anime again in the next episode of Jacob and KKD talking anime and philosophy. Yeah.
All right. Have a great
All
night,
right,
dude.
man. Yeah. Have a great night to you, morning to me. Whatever it is. Yeah, it's night to you, right? So
Yes.
yeah, and it's start of the day to me. All right, so bye, man, and it's been awesome. I'll see you next time. Awesome. If you like this video, hit the like button, and don't forget to share and subscribe. And I'll see you again next time. Goodbye.